Month. It's Tuesday, January 2nd. Today is the first Digital World Town Hall meeting for 2024, and we're grateful for those who are in attendance, especially those that are helping to moderate as the holidays are still among us, supposedly over as of yesterday, but we're going to do a quick review, some of the things that happened over the holidays, not a lot, but there's some interesting opportunities that have kind of reached out and exploring potentials. We have moderators with us today, Al and Wally. Thank you for being here and for all that you do and have done and continue to do. This is a private membership association. Some of the things we'll talk about may be forward-looking. And again, for those that are not aware, this is around decentralization, decentralizing really systems for humanity. So it's a simple model where it takes a device, an access device, in this case, any Apple phone, Android phone, or Clear phone, and enables decentralized storage and identity to be owned and operated by the individual instead of centralized secret combinations or ecosystems. If you'd like to join, you're welcome to do so. I'd recommend this URL here at townhall.clear.events, but we're grateful for those that are in attendance. If you have live questions, you're welcome to ask them there. And Happy New Year. We'll go ahead and get started. For those that are new, this is the digital world, and the digital world is focused on providing decentralized systems through service providers and technology, namely infrastructure, through developers that can actually help to build out future systems for future generations. We've talked about a lot in the Pacific for 2023, and so far this year we've met with 19 different countries, and 4 of which have actually either in active development or full deployment of the digital world systems and technologies. Some of those can be found at, let's go to Digital Tuvalu. You can also find them with different countries such as Vanuatu, as well as we've done a lot of work with Fiji and the Reserve Bank of Fiji. And then namely recently, and so this is probably one of the most important ones, even though it still has a lot of work to go, but Tuvalu. It's the least traveled country in the world. It's in the middle of the Pacific Ocean. And then the Kingdom of Hawaii. Let's see here. Or I should say, you can find it at hawaiian.life. So these are 2 of the largest outcomes of this last year, primarily focused around any kind of device, such as Android, Apple, or any of the Clear devices being able to run the technology. It enables centralization to be decentralized, namely with systems that are usually centralized. So identity, when we talk about financial systems, land management systems, asset management systems, all of those things can basically be decentralized with the individual in the center of it instead of the opposite way around. So think about it, instead of going to a bank and getting a bank account number, and then if there's something that happens, you lose that bank or someone else is in control of it. Maybe the bank is bought or acquired, so now you're a part, like think about it, Silicon Valley Bank is now part of HSBC, which is a Chinese-based bank out of Hong Kong. A lot of those folks didn't choose that, and the net is assets are assets, but ultimately, the individual in this case is actually in control of their own assets, not just digital assets, but physical assets that can actually be paired with them. So imagine a land management system, and let's say there's a dispute around it, all of it is digital. So imagine a license plate that ties to a registration, that ties to a driver's license, where the individual can actually digitally allow data to be shared. And it keeps everyone basically safe, from the officer as well as the individual. But this is one of the many countries within the Pacific that we're talking about, at least is what we call phase 1. So when we look at this phase 1, we're seeing a lot of different countries within the Pacific that we've touched base with. And one of the things we're excited to announce today, the first day of 2024, is this phase 2. Okay. And so what we're talking specifically about is, for instance, in phase 1, we went through these different countries here. Some of them were invitation only. So for instance, Palau, they're going about it in a little different way in parallel. And they were really open to what we were doing and talking about, but they were already way down the road. So we look forward to kind of exploring that in the future. But what's interesting, as we're exploring potentials within the Virgin Islands, a lot of other things popped up. And so this is brand new as of this last week. So these are all countries, namely 12 countries that have their own currencies, their own ecosystems that are all uniting on the East Coast of, or I should say in the East Caribbean, to come together with whether it's a unified currency or unified voting or unified even passports, which in many realms, all these countries today actually have their own passports. Some of them may be looked at as weak. Some of them may be looked at it from a survival standpoint. But these countries coming together, and I'll kind of show you a flag at how it represents it. So as the Eastern Caribbean, so there's a union that's there, and then this particular ecosystem is a central bank that's tied to it called the Eastern Caribbean Central Bank, or ECCB. But there's some interesting opportunities that are surfacing within this ecosystem. And what's nice is it plays very well into where really oceanic-based islands that are their own nation, state, kingdom, country, however you want to position it, how they can actually operate with their own autonomy without centralizing technologies that were intended to be decentralized. And so that's really a large opportunity there. So we look forward to digging into that in the future, and just really kind of going through the details of what that means for humanity. It's something that is relatively new to us. We haven't done a lot of work within, this is really the Atlantic Ocean, but we also have, let's see if I can find a second or two. I'll probably be able to pull it up here real fast. Nope, not real fast. That's too bad. I was excited to show you some other advancements, namely around a coalition that unites all these different oceanic-based organizations, whether they're, coalitions or whether they're nations that are already there. But I'll plan on doing that throughout the next week. So that's basically the big news. There hasn't been a lot of other noise other than testing that's going on, particularly over the holiday with some of the apps that are different platform based, namely Apple, and adding different wallet capabilities to that. So I won't keep blabbing. Any questions, thoughts, comments from anybody? Feedback, observations, anything?
Well, I've got a bunch of questions.
Go ahead.
Well, it looks to me like you're using an Apple computer. Why is that?
Yes, sir.
Well, isn't open source software important to you?
It very much so is. As a matter of fact, if you look at some of the technology that we're streaming on here, all of this technology is open sourced, as well as the technology of the browser that's sitting on it. Notice this Clear Web. So this so one thing that we learned the hard way is the technology that's associated with open source is usually not really usable. And so what we find is people use usable devices. We kind of break it into three different realms: usable, affordable, and secure. And so as you know, with open source is usually very secure, and it's usually very affordable, but it's usually not usable. And so what we find is we're forced, for instance, this last month was the first time I ever bought an Apple phone in my life. And the reality is the market that we're looking at, as well as the decision makers that we're working with, they all use access devices that are from companies like Apple or Microsoft, et cetera. And so we've got to figure out a way, just like what I'm showing you here. This is technology that replaces, the different streaming platforms, whether it's WebEx or whether it's Zoom, but we're doing it in such a way that is, I'll change that out, that is leveraging an open platform, leveraging open source, as well as an open platform that's actually being streamed on. So you can see the web browser on the device, as well as the actual applications on the device, are all using open source technologies, but we're leveraging platforms. And so we finally figured out that we actually have to do a lot of the testing that's based upon where the market is. So if we go and look at what's the market size, what's the adoption, what's the reality is around percentage of adoptions, it looks something similar to this, which is actually pretty scary, but these are the numbers. So just with mobile phones and access devices, 3.75 billion worldwide, Android, and 1 billion Apple. And the technology that we've worked with, and most folks don't know this, but not only have we built mobile phones, so for some of you that have seen some of the phones or some of you that hadn't, it's the hardware, software, and services associated with the phones, but it's much more than that. We also built tablets, we also built PCs and laptops. But when we go through focusing on what is it that we're going to do within one goal for 1 year, that's what we do in October, November. We light up goals for a particular calendar year, and we focus on how we can do it better than anyone else in the world. And if we can't do it better than anyone else in the world, we shouldn't be doing it. But it's got to be quantified into one measurable goal. So an X to a Y by a certain date. And then everyone in the organization should be behind that in one form or another, whether they're in a different division or a different group or a different country. But we find that we can actually defensively help add value, not by boiling the ocean and being everything to everybody, but helping to be able to get open technologies into the world's hands by using it on general platforms that are already out there, namely Android or Apple. And so what you're talking about here is not necessarily a mobile device, but an access device. And this same access device, which, by the way, I may even have, like when we log into these tools and technologies right here, things we're actually working through now is within these different interfaces. Maybe it's the Hawaiian Kingdom, maybe it's the digital world. But when people actually log into these different interfaces, they actually have a similar user experience as they would on the mobile phones or the access devices that are in them. So hopefully that answers your question and helps you understand that we're not focused on boiling the ocean and doing everything for everybody. And as you would relate, being an open source purist, because we understand that to be able to get real world adoption, we have to be able to provide options for the general markets that are already have adoption, such as Apple and Android. Make sense?
Hardly. I don't understand what's wrong with SUSE Linux. That's supported by a corporation. It's open source.
Well, it's actually supported by a corporation that we helped, which was Novell. And Novell bought SUSE from a company out of Germany. And they actually aren't offering the same level of desktop support that you would imagine. So server support, they do. Desktop support, especially with stuff that we're talking about, not even close. But we know the technology very well. As a matter of fact, similar technology to SUSE is ClearOS.com, which is basically a server network PC-based operating system. You can get different versions of it. If you go to ClearOS.com, you can also see how we've partnered with different organizations to basically provide. But you've got business, home, community, and then there's older editions. So this is exactly what SUSE is. And it actually does run on a desktop, believe it or not, but it's not something that we believe that we can successfully support within that ecosystem. So these are all the different. Go ahead.
I thought you were using RHEL as the software for your servers.
Yeah, Red Hat Enterprise Linux, RHEL, is what ClearOS is built on. So it's a binary replacement for Red Hat Enterprise Linux. And this is basically what it looks like from a web interface. So we had built a web interface way before.
Now, Red Hat Enterprise Linux is no longer open source.
Yep, you're right.
They've managed to neuter that license.
Yeah. So basically what they've done is IBM has bought their biggest competitor in Red Hat Enterprise Linux, which was much better than the SUSE-based product in some realms, and in others we could argue that. And they've killed it. They've shelved it and killed it, and they've killed the whole Fedora ecosystem and the whole CentOS ecosystem. And it was by design, and they all sold out. And that is what it is. And again, we can't do everything for everybody. This is the server networking gateway layer, so you can kind of see the network layer and all the different apps. There's 45 different apps between those layers. This is the gateway layer and all the apps, and this is the server layer and all the apps. But we spent 17 years building this, and massive deployments. I'll go through the business that's behind it. So it's clearcenter.com. This basically built the support and services, kind of like how Red Hat supported Red Hat Enterprise Linux. That's what this did, and you can kind of see the adoption ratios here. So 17 years building it, 135 different marketplace apps, which I was just showing you some from the server network gateway layer, 154 countries, 260,000 deployments. On average, we had about 19 users per LAN segment and about over 10 million supported users worldwide, or deployed users worldwide. So yes, we understand open source. We understand the power play between the two, and we also choose to fight the fight that we believe that we can actually win, which is in the hand. It's in the hand of the users. It's within their ability to get their own derived keys and to decentralize their life, not necessarily learn how to run a server console in the back end, such as yourself. So hopefully
I wouldn't do that either.
What's that?
I said I wouldn't do that either. I'm not a techie.
Yeah. Well, next questions, thoughts, feedback, comments?
Why are you using DuckDuckGo? I understand they sold out, caved into government pressure to open the back door to surveil all their users.
As far as a search engine, it's the closest thing that's a productive based search engine that actually works. And I'd agree with you that it's sad to see these open source companies sell out, such as Red Hat Enterprise Linux and DuckDuckGo, but it is what it is.
Well, what about SearchXNG or Presearch?
Haven't touched them. What other comments or questions do you have?
Well, did you ever look up Chordal?
Yep, want nothing to do with it. I looked at it.
Can you tell me why?
Too many warning lights all over the place. Lots of warning lights. We don't want to get in the speculation or gambling side of the world, and especially when it talks about blockchain. And some of the individuals are not folks that we would choose to be involved with. So
I'd sure like to know more about that. I mean, if it's something to stay away from, I want to know about it. I know why.
I've given you my direct feedback. I won't talk negative about folks, but I did do research on it.
Okay.
Other questions, thoughts, comments, feedback? Okay, we'll wrap up today's meeting early. Thank you for those that are in attendance. We'll see you next Tuesday, which will be the 9th of January. And grateful for the world getting kicked off, especially what we're talking about with this phase 2 and those that are involved with that.
Michael, can you just go over phase 2 again? Have you been speaking with them?
So early on, long ago, there was actually some folks within the finance divisions of some of these countries that came on to these same calls every week. And they were in 2 or 3 of these different countries, and they ended up going down a road to start a pilot, what they call Dcash. And they basically have created a currency for the Eastern Caribbean that works with a exchange rate into each of the countries, and then that converts at about $2.70 per what they would call this pilot currency into the US dollar. And so we've been working with 2 or 3 of the different countries, individuals within the finance division, but nothing formally. And just this last week is when the formal invitation basically came to meet with the governor of one of these divisions that basically runs the Eastern Caribbean Central Bank. So, they've seen some of the work that we've been doing within the Pacific, and they want to explore the potential. And they're not that far apart from what's going on in the Pacific, yet it's a very different ecosystem, but they're very well organized. For instance, there's nothing in the Pacific that's aligning the different currencies to be able to have direct trading pairs within a western eastern side of it. But I can see a future where, imagine the Western Caribbean, Eastern Caribbean come together, and then maybe the Pacific, the Western, maybe around Hawaii, maybe around Fiji. They come together in such a way that then all these oceanic countries can basically start trading and working together. They normally don't have a lot of trade because they're in different parts of the realm or the world together. But imagine if there's a coalition, especially when you're talking about digital assets, where these different and the reason that we think that these islands and these different oceans and bodies of water are very important is they already understand decentralized principles. They already have it in the core of what their countries are about. Self-reliance, self-sovereignty, self-determination. They already understand that. And so it's not a far stretch to help them to come in together. And so if they all come together with the same type of technology and platform on the back end that is not centralizing decentralization, which I would look at as the real core questions around what this is. Yes, technology needs to be GPL'd and open sourced and the things that Raymond was talking about. But the reality is it doesn't really matter if you're using open source technology under the covers of it if you're centralizing all of the intelligence and data. So the goal is to have a platform where the intelligence and data is given to the individual. And Raymond has a point where you've got to do it in such a way where the technology is actually auditable, open, and secure, but transparent. And as long as you have that, then you have the recipe for governments that can then be transparent. And it really comes down to, if the governments succumb to the IMF and the World Bank and the ability to get money over selling out their citizens or nationals or residents or whatever kind of name you put behind becoming a citizen of a country. So this is a big deal for us. I mean, this next month is going to be a real key month within this, the second phase, 2024, where these different countries that are named here in this, the phase 2 of these invitations, it's important. So, and then we've still got the committed effort within the Pacific. Some of the work that's been done, namely around the Hawaiian Kingdom, is probably one of the biggest things, because that's not just standing up, a governance system within a country. That's also standing up a country that was taken. And
as was New Zealand.
Yeah, Aotearoa was definitely taken. They have at least the Waitangi Agreement, which is different than the Kingdom of Hawaii or the Hawaiian Islands, where the Hawaiian Islands didn't even have anything like the Waitangi Agreement. But I can tell you that, from living in New Zealand or Aotearoa for a couple of years, you're absolutely right that it was taken, and it's. But there was a time, at least before Jacinda and her presidency, or whatever you want to call her ministry. I believe that government was actually truly accountable to its citizens. We were able to approach and have conversations, and the way that they divided up who its citizens were that could vote was, if you're paying a power bill, you're able to have a vote. And the way that the government worked back in 2011, 2012, 2013 is very different than what's already being taken over. It's what you're seeing with all of these other colonial-based countries, such as Australia and Canada. You're seeing New Zealand now fall in the same ranks as those. But what the Hawaiian Kingdom is doing, I think, sets a precedence for other countries. Like, if you look at Vanuatu, so you can see right here, Vanuatu has literally they've actually just recently taken over their independence from two countries at the same time, both Britain and France. They were occupied by both countries in one or more of their 83 islands or 81 islands. And it's been eye-opening to see how there are still countries that are still controlled against their will by others. And the question is, what's the will and how do you track the votes? And that's where a lot of these things have come into question, is the voting systems. And so New Zealand is one of those countries that uses Dominion voting systems to elect their ministry. And I would say that's the same thing that's happened in America.
Yeah.
So.
Well, I have another question.
Go ahead.
If you're finished.
Go ahead.
How is ClearOS Mobile coming along?
Let's see if I can find that for you. Well, actually, I'll pull up this other, let's see, I'm going to come to clearos.com. I'm going to go to, I want to say it's in here. This is all server side.
By the way, I'm asking questions not only for myself, but for our local Freedom Cell group.
Mm-hmm. That's okay. No, it's fine. Just know that I've been down the open source realm for a long term, and I understand the mentality, and I do think it's very important. But at the same time, we've got to operate within reality. And reality is open source has not won on the adoption side of things.
Yeah, the real technologists are not idealists.
That's exactly right. That's exactly right.
And the idealists are not technologists. There isn't organization.
Mm-hmm. I'm going to try and find the right page. Elle, can you ping Shiv or Tyler on an SSL cert within ClearOS or ClearCellular? So this is the mobile operating system. It's actually a full fork of Android. And the direct answer to your question is going to be, this isn't it. There's a page that I'm looking for that goes through specifically the mobile version. Oh, here we go. Here it is right here, coming. It's right in front of my face with the big red thing. Okay, so ClearOS Mobile is basically just that. It's a fork, but the goal is to actually work with different hardware manufacturers, such as some of these, as well as chipset providers and camera providers, which is where we're getting stuck. We're getting stuck at the chipset and camera providers on a lot of the different support. But you can see the different cellular carriers as well as the different hardware providers that ClearOS Mobile.
Among the hardware providers, you've got the word Google. I assume that means the Pixel phones.
Yep, that's right. Yep.
Well, I've got one of those, so I was wondering, do I put Lineage OS or Graphene on it till you get that finished, or what should I do?
Well, if you look here, so it says eventually run on many cell phone hardwares. It'll actually run on the Pixels, but you're going to have problems when it comes to some of the cameras and some of the chipsets. So we're working through them. It's not a core competency for us to focus on right now. What we're focused on is basically getting the multiple operating systems such as these to actually run the apps. So for instance, Apple or Android phones can now run the decentralized technology. That was more important than saying, hey, let's take an edge case use case where a technologist wants to figure out how to get an open source operating system to run on hardware that has closed or proprietary standard sets. Now, the Pixel's a pretty good open platform where the drivers are pretty much available. I don't know if you're familiar with the $700 million lawsuit that Google just lost based upon them being closed around their operating system, particularly how their GSM licensing worked. And so they would lock in certain operating providers and hardware providers that had the actual software for the drivers, for the chipsets, or for, it could be a GPS chipset. It could be the goal is to have a world where everything is open and standards are there, but in all reality, we're not there right now. And so without that being a reality, these types of things are on the wayside. So you're not going to get today direct support. Now, there are some folks inside the forums. If you come into this community and you go into these forums, you'll find people in here that are real active, and some of them actually have a spirit of helping one another. So for instance, 4 days ago, you see this IMAP that's broken, or this PHP, or, a certificate, or something's expired, or some type of failure. You're seeing people help people. These are just the last 2 weeks. And some of them, we're talking thousands of interactions. For instance, this is Samba, right? So this is a file share technology that's an open source standard within the filing industry. So this is a good example of, how you used to have Macs that only talked with Mac clients, and you have printers that were only talking Mac clients, and you had, to your point around SUSE would work with both Windows and Mac and open. Then you had Windows that would only work with Windows. And so what Samba would do is it would work with all of them on file sharing. And that's an example of an open standard where people could actually work together to create solutions. And so that technology, one of the original founders of Samba was actually one of the original individuals involved within the ClearOS server side of it as well. His name is John Terpstra, wonderful man. But you can see if for individuals such as yourself, if you want to grab, I want to say, if you come in here and you look at the forum index, it might even have a group. It may be too new for it, but mobile, yeah, right here. So you've got some of the mobile stuff, but you'll see it's just barely starting. There's nothing really here. Whereas if you go into cloud, you've got hundreds of post strings, and then network is even more, where you've got thousands, gateway is hundreds, server is thousands. So you've got lots of apps, lots of support, and then this is all support that just people are supporting one another. So the net is on the mobile side of it still very new. Now, I'd urge you to remember that, this has been 17 years in the making. So the server side of it, this technology is 17 years old, right? And the mobile side of it, as far as just being open source, Google just lost their first lawsuit for antitrust stuff within the last 60 days. So,
how is that going to affect the Pixel phone's usage?
I believe that the GSM technology blockers, inhibitors that Google intentionally puts onto their phones from the hardware manufacturers. So they're saying, if you're going to manufacture hardware, like what happened with Huawei. So Huawei would put Google's technology on their phones, and Google's like, nah, we don't like that, so we're going to go ahead and whack it. So they literally decimated the hardware. So Huawei, in my opinion, made and still makes the best hardware in the world. But what they try and do is a massive smear campaign when, for instance, I personally sat down with the CEO. He was then the CEO of Huawei, face to face. And I said, we will work with your platform if you show us where your back doors are.
Yeah.
And they were willing to do that. They were willing to admit that. They were willing to engage. Whereas you have organizations like Cisco, and I won't even name other names because Cisco's the main one that hit the news, where they have backdoors into their hardware, but they don't tell people about it.
Yeah.
So, the point being is honesty, transparency, and standards, namely open source based standards, is where the future will be, period. And those that adhere to those standards, just like your point, what is it you're using for search and desktop and all this stuff? It's like, great, but show me something that's functional, it's secure, it's affordable, and it's actually got some adoption to it. And that's where we have to go to be able to get this to become a reality. This just straight up fact. So,
Well, what advice would you give me as to what to put on the Pixel in order to use it with your system?
go to the Google Play Store and download Digital Life, and then you're good to go. You're done. Go
Well, what
download.
operating system? You said you didn't want to work with graphene at all.
You're welcome to work with any operating system you want. If you want graphene, put it on your phone. We're not going to support it. You know, we're here to support decentralized systems. We're not here to push the bandwagon for open source bigots. And the reality is we've lived in that world and we will die in that world. The open source ecosystem is what will enable decentralization to truly thrive. But we're not spending another dollar pushing what operating system people use. The operating systems are only half the battle. The apps that you layer on top of these operating systems, if they give away your GPS, if they give away your storage, if they give away your mics, you know, you're done. It doesn't really matter what operating system you run when you give away access to you download Facebook and everything you say is recorded and then meta tagged, and then, you know, they market to you based upon it. So it's like, and we've done so much with these operating systems to know most of, like Graphene and others, and even some of the Google Android systems, they are very secure operating systems. The way they do their threading and their security, they're very, very secure. The problem is, for convenience, people give away their privacy without even thinking twice about it. And right now we're fighting a battle to get to the masses, but the simple answer is go to your Google Play Store, search Digital Life, look for this icon, download it. It'll give you your 12 words. It'll synchronize your fingerprint with it on the existing hardware that you have, and you're up and going on your Pixel phone. Just that simple.
Well, why did you call graphene, would you call something bigots?
No, I didn't. I didn't call graphene per se. All I'm saying is there's a mentality in the open source world, and I have the same mentality, so don't take offense to the words. But open source is like a religion. It's something we will live by and die by. And I'm in that same boat. I'm in the same.
As much as you can be.
You got it. And, you know, but there's also a point where time comes in and adoption comes in and sense of urgency comes in, where we've got to get to market. We've got to get adoption. It's not just about how much open source code can I use. When we really talk about, now I'm going to pull up, I'm going to go to clearos.com. I'm going to click on competition. When we're talking about competing with these different companies, and then this is just in the big tech world, and we're talking about big tech that's big centralized tech versus open decentralized tech. When we compare Apple to what we've built with Clear, you know, not all of this is 100% open. For instance, some of the support stuff, it's not even open source code. You know, there's some proprietary stuff that we have to sign agreements with to get access to use some of these other systems, but we can create an alternative versus this centralized system. Same thing with Google. You know, you've got the search and you've got that DuckDuckGo that you talked about. Is it 100%? No. Is it better than Google? Yes. I can tell you right now that you may feel like you're sold out by DuckDuckGo, but there's still data that they do not give to Google that Google grabs. It's like I'm blown away that what people give away within it, and it's really just comes down to that conveniency factor. So when we talk,
I'm more concerned about what goes to the national security state than Google, although that too, of course.
Yeah, but it's like what I'm saying. There's a point where.
Well, I got your point.
You can only win so many battles. So to
would
speak.
you rather see me use Lineage OS until yours is available rather than Graphene?
Yeah, I would.
Okay, why is that?
It's a more advanced platform. It's got a future to it. And I know the developers. I know the developers behind both of them, but, you know, Just a simple recommendation. But,
Well, that's what I'm looking for.
yeah. And this goes to your operating system with Red Hat Enterprise Server with IBM. I mean, this is it right here, you know. So we're doing our best to try and create alternatives to the centralized big tech ecosystem that
Yeah.
has lots of money spent on it, you know, and we're leveraging millions of lines of code with hundreds of thousands of developers and less than 100 developers that have touched this compared to the many hundreds of thousands of the closed source technologies. So that simple slide right there around data, that's very telling from my perspective. So other questions or thoughts?
I had one, but it's slipping my mind right now.
It's all good. It's been nice to get to know you.
Oh, I know. How do I download Clear Web? I was looking for that. I wanted to use it. And
I don't believe it's available, but if it is, it would be here. So you go to clearos.app, you click on Marketplace.
basically, I have to be a member of your ecosystem to get it. Is that right?
No, as a matter of fact, anything within the Marketplace, you can grab the APK files without logging in or downloading anything, which is very different than any other ecosystem. But Clear Web, for instance, you know, this app here, let's see, this app here that I'm using to stream on. So if you look up here, this Clear Web, I don't think you can download this on that same ecosystem, which I think is what you're asking about.
Well, my ecosystem, my desktop is Kubuntu.
Yeah, so Clear Web on the mobile side of it, this is where you'd grab it. And then the desktop side of it, which is what I just showed you, there may be a link inside of this that you could pull up. But again, you don't have to authenticate. You don't have to log in. You can grab the APKs right by clicking download. You know, I'd recommend doing this on the appropriate device. For instance, this particular system it's based on a browser for a mobile device, mobile phone. So this is not for a desktop.
It's basically a mobile phone web browser.
Yeah, but this is a full fat client. So this is Clear Web, but it's a full fat client. So this is on a desktop. And
So I should use it.
well, first off, just get the basics done, you know, just the real value of any of these apps within the Clear ecosystem is the derived key interaction. So anything that you do with photos or with contacts or with finances or any of these different, you know, decentralized apps basically can use your derived keys to pull the data back. So if you're not even using derived keys and using what we call Clear Life or Digital Life or Hawaiian Life or Vanuatu Life, if you're not using the Life apps and using decentralized keys, you're not using the tech. So I would start there. So, you know, get Digital Life going, get your 12 words, and then start plugging in the other applications that may be able to add some value in your life. Does that resonate with you?
Yeah, but first I got to have an operating system on it before I even do that.
Well, you have an operating system on your Pixel phone today, don't you?
Yeah, commercial proprietary Android.
Yeah. So we've literally walked down the commercial proprietary Android game, I can't even tell you how many times we've been kicked out of the Google Play Store. But if you go to the Google Play Store on your Pixel phone, your Google Pixel phone, you will find Digital Life, and you basically go into it and you get your own encryption key. You know, you actually get your own keys.
But I should be able to get the same thing from within Lineage, shouldn't I?
Yeah. And this APK will work within Lineage as well.
That's what I wanted to know. That's where I'm going to go.
But let me make sure I'm crystal clear with you. We're not going to support it in that operating system.
Well, what would you support? I would think you were not supporting anything but your own.
We do better than support. We actually wrap the hardware, software, and services, and you can go and buy it with or without Google, and literally, you know, turnkey it. So it's all built and done. But if
I do
490,
understand that.
so that's how we build offerings that are easy for people to purchase and use, but at the same time, they don't have to feel like they've got to boil the ocean or it's too complex for them to get it or support it. So
I understand.
yeah, just like in the ClearOS server world, we give away the operating system. It's free for everyone. But if there's an element of support that they want us to give to them, then there's a fee to it. And that's just so we can run a profitable business and not be a charity most of the time or all the time. Sometimes I feel like we're a little bit more of the charity side than we should be, but that is what it is. So I hope I've answered your questions adequately. I know that it's a touchy subject, especially for folks that don't understand the open source mentality, but I can underscore what Raymond's talking about is it's massively important to work with technology that is transparent, honest, and open. And that doesn't mean that it's free. The software code may be free, but just like Raymond's talking about, it's going to take some work and time. Time is money. Time is energy. Time is the most valuable thing that we all have. Right, Raymond?
Yeah.
Yeah. So, I appreciate your time. I appreciate your energy. I even appreciate your hard questions. It's
Boy, I actually appreciate your time. My God, I couldn't imagine to begin with that you could even have such an opportunity as this.
Yeah. Well, it's important to have open and honest, transparent communication along with code. And so we try and, every week, no matter where we are, we settle down for an hour and we give you open questions and answers, even if they're difficult. Not everybody understands them, but I appreciate someone such as yourself that understands the power of open source, because I look at what's happening now within the biological world that we all live in, and it's real similar to what happened in the technology world of past. You had, namely, an individual named Mr. Bill Gates who was beating his chest around software that had to have some antivirus or it would get infected, right? And then we always saw these things get slower and slower and blue screen and slower. And then you parallel that in the technology world to that inside of the biological world of the human body. And I see something very similar. You must have this antivirus to be able to just live a normal life. Well, I would argue that open, honest, transparent systems, whether it's in our body or whether it's within the technology world, is actually what provides an honest place for all of us to be able to operate. And what we're working on is in this digital world, it's an operating system for humanity. And you've touched on one piece of it, actually two pieces of it. I'll scroll down a little bit here and just talk about this because it's really key. You really are touching on it. So it takes a mobile operating system that's open source, a server operating system that's open source, and then you wrap it together with a blockchain-based system that is open source as well. And so something we haven't talked about is actually Ripple or Stellar or these platforms that are going to be the future of the financial system. Some people call it the quantum financial system, but in effect, it'll basically operate how value is pushed from one ecosystem to another ecosystem. And these are countries that we're working with to help enable them because they're open-minded, they have open perspectives, and there's a lot of folks that are against having countries like this stand up with technologies that's going to leapfrog over the big countries today. I can tell you firsthand, there's a lot of folks that don't want that to happen, but it's important for us to slow down and to document this process as it's happening. And for those of you that show up and you actually join the journey, the work, the efforts, driving awareness, driving alignment, driving interactions, even driving difficult questions like what you've talked about today, Raymond. We're grateful for those that have continued to show up and are just a part of this journey. So,
can I ask one more?
Yeah, go for it.
You said that you have your own software layer that you put on top of storage. you use storage, but not directly. You do it indirectly through a layer of your own software. Can you explain that?
I wouldn't say we use storage. I would say we use SIA more than storage. And the layer that we put in front of it is an indexing layer that is decentralized using IPFS, which is a form of interplanetary file system, which is another open source operating system for the storage layer. And it's basically how storage is intelligently organized and can work and operate it. So we don't necessarily offer the storage, but we offer the platform that plugs into the storage. And I can tell you there's other technologies that will leapfrog over the storage J's of the world, and that's spelled with a J.
Yes, I know.
Or the SIAs of the world, which is going through their own cocooning process, and I'll just kind of leave that at that. But you know, both of these organizations supposedly work off of open standards and protocols that they like to have as a standard, but that's to be determined in the future. A lot of the standards in the storage space, I believe, will tie to the S3 storage, and there's open source versions of S3, which is the Amazon version. So you can work with Amazon storage, or you can work with open, not just open source, but open protocols that tie to the S3 protocol, which is, again, it's created by Amazon initially, but it's not delivered by Amazon. So.
Well, can I, once again, you're phone centric, not desktop centric. So the storage that people store through you is from their phone, not a desktop. Is that right?
That could be perceived as right. Think about it this way. Do you take photos from your desktop and then store them somewhere? 98% of the time, you really don't, right? You take a photo from your phone and then you'd upload it from your phone. And the question is, you know, whether your phone has 128 gigs of storage or 256 or 512 or a terabyte, or you plug in some other SD cards and maybe it's a couple terabytes. But usually that storage is not actually retained on the phone, but it's tied to some cloud-based storage system. Maybe it's Apple storage, maybe it's Google storage, but the goal is to get it to be your own storage and you're the only one that has access to it. And that's really what we're talking about here. So
that's great, but I want the same thing for my desktop.
Yeah, so there's just a web interface that basically pulls open, you know, everything that you've uploaded from your phone. It's like today, you know, you have a desktop that has a browser that has a URL that goes to your photos that actually ties to what is found on your phone. That same technology and capabilities is what we're talking about, but you actually do it by logging in. So I'll actually do this for you real fast. Hopefully I don't have to type this on. I do.
Well, actually, I don't think you're right. I don't move almost anything from my phone to my desktop. I'm an old goat who doesn't use phones for anything but telephone calls.
Yeah, but that's not what I just said. What I said is you move it from your phone to the cloud more often than you move it to your actual desktop. So what we're seeing is an adoption where if I log in to the digital world, imagine I can actually log in and I can see my photos, my contacts, my messages, any kind of voting, any kind of agreements, all of these systems and apps through a web interface that I can access from my phone or from a desktop, but the data is all mine. I don't know if that resonates with you.
Oh, perfectly. That's exactly what I want.
Yeah. So you're actually moving it from your phone to a decentralized cloud storage infrastructure that then you can access from your desktop device, just like I'm doing here. I just logged in to my desktop device through the secure authentication process where I use my phone to actually log in with 5-factor authentication that I own the factors. And the storage that's behind this is not in one central place. It's decentralized and using data sharding.
I understand all that. The problem is I don't use my phone for anything but telephone calls, practically. A few other things when necessary. But all my data on my computer, I want to have backed up, not through the phone, but through a direct storage mechanism, decentralized with me in control. just as you're describing.
Yeah. And that's wonderful, but the majority of the world is actually going to have a phone and not a desktop. As much as
Right.
you and I operate off of a desktop because that's what we grew up on, you know, the majority of the world is actually going to have a phone over a desktop,
Yeah.
period.
I've seen that. I know.
So
Okay.
we'll adjourn today's meeting unless there's any other questions from anybody else or maybe a New Year's wish. And here's to a wonderful 2024. So happy holidays, everybody. Much love, and we'll talk to you next week. Bye.
Thank you, Mike.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Bye-bye.
Mahalo.
Mahalo. Hey, mahalo.
I will say one thing.
Go.
It is fascinating to see two smart guys because I can barely turn on a doggone device. So it's fun to hear two very smart guys going back and forth and like trying to figure out what they're saying.
Oh, you're too
Oh,
kind.
great.
You're too kind, Charles. I miss you.
No,
buddy.
no, being straight up, man.
Miss you.
I can barely turn the darn thing on.
No, better than that. Okay, everybody.
Well, I can
talk to
turn
you
it off too.
soon. Sheesh.
Thank you for Raymond and Michael because that's kind of fun listening to the two of you. Like, oof.
Yeah. Well,
Well, the smart guys think I'm an idiot, and I am.
no, you're not.
Thank you.
We're grateful for the opportunity to know you, Raymond. Look forward to building the future together.